I got a new coach in today. This is Coach George with the Strong Hat Game.
It's new.
It's new, it's new. So today we're talking about pulling, upper body pulls, because deadlifts it's technically a pull, right? You're
it utilizes the upper back and mid back.
If you do it right,
yeah.
Correct? So Coach George is gonna start by telling us the importance of pulling. And because I think with upper body, it's so easy to do pushing, especially if you're used to at-home workouts or P90X or maybe boot camp style workouts. It's push, 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 because you can do that without a lot of weight. But this is where strength training becomes so important. So tell us a little bit about pulling and why it's so underutilized.
Pulling exercises utilize the posterior musculature, the back, the posterior shoulder. And it's so important to train that because we train anterior a lot. When you train majority of the time in an anterior fashion, the anterior musculature, you're going to get tight in those muscles, and if you don't counteract it with posterior movements, you get loose. So it kind of creates this tightness up here, and we loosen it back there, and it creates this kind of douchebag rounded shoulder here. But it can cause rotator cuff injuries, and shoulder injuries and back injuries as well. It's not good for the spine. It can kind of cause kyphosis, which is the rounding of the upper back there.
Yeah.
And none of that is
neck
bueno.
Issues, impingement, so much happens because we just neglect pulling. And so one of the easiest warm-ups, we do this all the time, is kind of just those stretches and just making sure traps aren't engaged. So if you're a CrossFitter, we have all this up here, pulling those back and really focusing on upper back rhomboids, scapula retraction, right? So focusing on this part, and that's what we're gonna focus on today with these moves with George. So let's just start with the most basic, like the lawnmower. Are you down with that?
Yes.
So I'll do the move and you talk me through kind of pros and cons.
Of course.
Okay? Yeah. Cool. Let me get my hair up. Gotta get my hair ready to lift, to get strong as fuck. All right, cool, here we go. So when I'm doing these, I think it's just fun because you can go really heavy, like way heavier than you probably think. Go ahead and talk through the points of flaws that we don't want to see. So
obviously you want a bit of a hip hike. Here you don't want to be rounded under in the hips, but you also don't want to be super arched. So what that's going to cause if you have your hips hiked up super high, it's going to cause an arch in the lower back, like that. You don't want that. You don't want to compress those lumbar vertebrae. And if you are rounded at all or hips tilted under, it's going to cause this rounded back. Again, too much compression in that lumbar vertebrae. So everything we do, just like a deadlift, we want to stay flat, but that's also going to create a floor for you to pull a lot of weight if your back is rigid and strong. You want to start most every pulling exercises with a couple things, okay? You don't want to be super rounded forward. You don't want to let that shoulder come out of the capsule too far. Yep, so you want to stay strong, shoulders even. You want to have your scapulas tight, but shoulders down.
I feel my lat start to engage like
exactly.
crazy.
As soon as you bring that shoulder down, that lat engages, it starts to do what it's meant to do. If you have that shoulder too high towards your ear, you're going to engage a lot more of your trap, but see how her lat kind of gets mushy? When she brings her shoulder down, her lat engages.
I don't need more traps. I don't want more
exactly, and you see a lot of people who are super trappy. I'm one of them. That generally says there's kind of a dysfunction there. So one way to counteract that is keeping those shoulders down and scapula muscles engaged.
I feel that for sure.
If your shoulder's too high, you're going to be very trappy. You can even strain a trap doing that. So
cool.
Most pulling exercises, shoulder back and down to start.
And you can do it also with impact from the at-home fitness people.
And that engages more of the bicep, which is always fun.
Yes, bis and tris. So that's the most basic, I think, because pull-up bars aren't always accessible. But let's talk about pull-ups. So I think if you're brand new, actually let's start here. If you're brand new, and feel free to talk through this if you see some things to be better. If you're nervous about hanging on a pull-up bar, if you're really new to this, even assisted, and you don't have access to an assisted pull-up bar, lat pull-downs can be fantastic. So we have fancy functional training from Rep. So again, go ahead, you can talk me through this
so
trap.
I want you to actually have your hips right under the bar to simulate a pull-up.
There we go.
And try and keep your chest as vertical as possible. Now, what do we start every pulling movement with? Shoulders back and down. Good. That engages the lats. And I want you to touch just below your collarbone and drive your elbows straight down. If you bring your elbows back, it means you're getting your traps a little too involved. And if you're too far forward, then it's probably too light. But
yeah,
but drive those elbows straight down, and so you're going to engage those right lat muscles right there. Good.
Perfect. And then 3 sets of 10 to 12. Does that sound good to you?
If you want to start getting a little heavier to train for a pull-up, you can even go into the 5, 6, 8 range.
Yep, because your pull-up has to be your weight, right? We're pulling up
Exactly,
our weight.
Yeah. And if you're doing 10 to 12 reps of something that's lighter, it's going to be hard to get strong enough to train for your first pull-up.
Yeah,
which is just like a 1 rep max. If you want to train for a 1 rep max on back squat, you're going to do the lower rep range too. But you need to build hypertrophy and the muscle mass with those rep ranges of 8 to 12 to get there.
Totally. And then with assisted pull-ups, we have bands of all different lots of different ones that's going to like spring you to the sky.
Yeah.
So I do like this because I feel like it's way more functional compared to lat pull downs or machines, because you feel what it feels like to do a pull up.
And what's actually nice is it gets you started, which is for most people who have never done a pull up, that's the hardest part. So it gets you used to starting. It's actually easier than most people think. The hardest part's really at the top.
Yeah.
And it makes you really train for that, because the band gets you there, but then it gets looser, and you really have to fight for that top.
And totally what you'll see, even when people that can do pull-ups, so most people you'll see do chin-ups for women because it's easier. There's more bicep engagement, right? And it's closer. So you'll get here, but you'll start to round at the top, and you'll start to do everything you just told us not to do with that pull. So chest is back.
Same thing with the pull-ups of all variety. Shoulders back and down, and as you come up, you don't want to hike back at all.
Yeah. So
just like with the lat pull down, you stay vertical and you pull right down to your collarbone.
Cool. And then for differences of wide grip, close grip, variations, what do you suggest for like all the types?
I always suggest as much variety as possible, but you want to play to your weaknesses too. If you're weak somewhere, you want to train that.
I'm really good at these, and I'm getting better at these.
Exactly. If you are weak in the wide variety of pull-up, then you want to be doing wide pull-ups as well as wide lat pull-downs and stuff like that to train that to get up to par. If you get stronger there, everything else will get stronger too.
How often, how many times should someone do pull-ups a week?
Pull-ups, 1 or 2 times a week.
Cool.
But as far as vertical pulling movements, 3 to 4 times a week, as well as horizontal pulling movements, 3 to 4 times a week.
Cool. Let's talk about horizontal pulling movements. We have bent over row. Should we work backwards and maybe start bent over row?
Especially if you've never done a bent over row, always work backwards.
Cool.
And start with the progression.
Cool.
The progression I suggest to everybody is to start with a chest supported row.
Cool. Let's start it. I'll have you do this. I'll get you weights.
That works right there.
Perfect.
Just grab another 30. I think we all know the first place to start with form, shoulders back and down. But this one's nice because the only thing you have to rely on is your back strength, for the most part. Because I'm supported by the bench, I don't have to, in a regular bent over row, you have to worry about glute strength, lower back strength, and all that. But right here, it's all dependent on how much I can actually pull through my shoulders and back. A big mistake a lot of people make as well as
chin up. Same
the
as
chin
deadlift.
up.
Yep.
That activates a lot of the traps and neck muscles. You're just praying to strain something there. So tuck the chin, shoulders off the bench and supported by the chest. Remember, from here my shoulders are forward, so shoulders off the bench, shoulders back and down. From here, I want to pull as high as I can without hiking my shoulders up. Right here, if that's above the bench, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
At least to the bench, but if you can't make it to the bench, that's definitely too heavy and go down a weight.
Too heavy a weight, yeah.
Yeah. So the higher you go up, though, the more your lats really squeeze and activate, and it trains really good strength for the lats.
Instead of just jumping to bent over row, which we'll end with, and then moving to this. I like this one a lot. So we'll do 10 pounds just because I can grab those easily. Whew. So from here, now we can start to engage our posterior chain.
Good. So this is a really good progression in between the chest supported row and the bent over row, because she still has to use that lower back and those glutes to elevate her body, just like in the bent over row, but she's not in a vulnerable position. If her back gives out at all, she just goes down, just like a back raise, and that's totally fine. From there, she's either probably doing too much weight or too many reps.
Yeah. You think 10 reps for this?
Yeah, at least 10 reps. You want to do higher reps with an exercise like this to train that strength for the lower back. It's a less vulnerable position, which is super nice. So you can just kind of dig into the reps and go for high volume with this to really train that.
Perfect. And then finally, so we feel like we got that strength. We don't feel bent over rows are scary and intimidating.
One side note is in a program where I would have an athlete doing the GHD rows, I would concurrently having them train the RDL. Because in the RDL, at the very end of the movement, which is also building that strength and musculature, at the very end of the movement, it's very similar to that position you'd be in a bent over row.
Yeah.
The difference with the bent over row, since this is such a vulnerable position for the back and hips, with the bent over row, I have the athlete push their knees just a little bit forward so that a little more leg loaded, and so they have their quads helping them out with the weight. And then from there, I have them do the row.
So go ahead and show them a few reps with this. So again, you'll recognize this with the work we did with Gary on our deadlift days. Start all the way at the top, lean over, push those knees forward, and then drive to chest. And tell me about the flaws. You don't want to be swinging, right? We don't want to kettlebell swing on this.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be like driving your shoulders up.
I see that a lot.
And then coming down to the bar.
Yeah.
If you're doing that, if you have to do that, the weight is definitely too heavy.
Yeah.
And that's a telltale sign of if it's too much weight. If you cannot get to your chest, or really kind of in between your chest and your abs.
Xiphoid process.
Exactly. Sternum, low sternum. If you can't get there without swinging, too much weight, it's pretty easy to know if there's too much weight on there. One other thing that a lot of people do is to kind of get out of the way of their knees. They kind of hold it out in front and then come back.
Yeah, pull that barbell in.
Increases that moment arm from your hips to the load and puts a lot more stress on your lower back. It increases the length of the lever that is your back, which is never a good thing to do. It just increases that tension.
Totally. So pull all the time. I think at least 2 times, 3 times a week. Something
I would even
that's
go
not
4. So the thing about the back muscles is you use them all the time.
Yeah.
Okay? So you do have some fast twitch in there. But you use them all the time. Just like the shoulders, you want to train them high frequency because they demand so much volume because they're so used to doing so much work all the time.
So to see changes, it involves lots of repetitions.
Just like biceps, shoulders, triceps too. All those muscles you want to train frequently, like calves as well. You want to train them frequently so that they actually get a stimulus that they're not used to.
That's true. That's a good point. And especially if you're used to doing work, like if you're a worker for your job and you tend to work a lot with your upper body.
Exactly. Yeah. And as far as volume goes, I like to stick to a 2-to-1 ratio of back exercises to anterior exercises.
Chesting,
like
push.
Chest press, shoulder press, that kind of stuff.
Cool.
That 2-to-1 ratio is going to ensure that you're not training the anterior side of your musculature too much to cause that kyphosis, anterior tilt in the shoulder.
For sure. So we got impact bent over rows, barbell bent over rows, GHD rows, lawnmower rows, bands, pull-ups, lat pull-downs.
Inverted rows are an incredible exercise.
Yeah. So many rows. So I want you to do them. I have lots of this listed. I know this is like a lot of information, but if you can master the row and the pull, you will be injury-free for the rest of your life, I swear to God. Like using lats, getting lat strength helped my bench press increase by 30 pounds. So it's important to stay safe, but also to be stronger. There's a famous saying in the strength and conditioning field, you should look better going than coming. That means that posterior side should be popping. All right, how do I look? All right, good job, George. Thank you. See you tomorrow.